The ground shook with another roar of pain. Dust rose from the massive crater like smoke from a volcano. Inside that deep hole lay Scarith, the war dragon of Arcturus Prime. And he was dying. For 300 years, Scarith had been the Coalition's greatest living weapon. His body stretched nearly 200 meters from nose to tail. His scales were black as deep space, each one harder than the armor plating on battleships. When he flew through the skies, entire enemy armies would retreat in terror. When he unleashed his plasma breath, fortified bunkers melted like ice under a sun. But now, the mighty dragon lay broken in a crater of his own making. The attack had come without warning 3 weeks ago. The Vacron, a species of insectoid warriors known for their cunning and cruelty, had set a trap. They lured Scarith into a narrow canyon and ambushed him with poison weapons. Hundreds of crystalline spines, each one filled with a toxin designed specifically to kill war dragons, had pierced through the gaps in his armor. Scarith had killed every Vacron soldier in that canyon. He had flown back to the Coalition base on Arcturus Prime, landed hard enough to create this crater, and hadn't moved since. The poison was eating him from the inside. His mighty body was rejecting every treatment the Coalition medics tried. General Thexral stood at the crater's rim, his forearms crossed over his chest. He was a Kreshtar, a species of reptilian warriors who had served in the Coalition military for generations. He had commanded battles across 50 star systems. He had seen soldiers die in every way war could devise. But watching Scarith suffer like this made even his battle-hardened hearts ache. "Any change?" he asked the medical officer beside him. Dr. Zenpoi, a Lumine whose crystalline body reflected the morning light in rainbow patterns, shook her head slowly. His vital signs continue to deteriorate. The poison has spread throughout his entire system. Every time we try to approach with medical equipment, he thrashes violently. We've lost 2 drones and nearly lost a medic yesterday. How long does he have? 3 days, maybe 4. Thexral nodded slowly. Prepare the euthanasia protocol. If he's going to die, let's at least spare him the pain. Down in the crater, Scarith's massive eye opened slightly. Even in his weakened state, his hearing was sharp enough to catch their words. A low rumble of defiance escaped his throat. He had fought in over 1,000 battles. He had saved millions of lives. He would not accept death by injection like some laboratory animal. Throughout the day, various species from across the Coalition base attempted to help. The Kreshtar warriors, with their knowledge of reptilian biology, tried approaching with healing oils made from rare plants. Scarith's tail whipped out so fast it created a sonic boom. The warriors barely escaped with their lives. The Lumine tried next. Their species could manipulate energy frequencies to promote healing. 5 of them positioned themselves around the crater's edge and began projecting harmonious waves of light energy toward the dragon. Scarith's response was to unleash a weak blast of plasma breath that melted the rocks they stood on. They retreated quickly. Even the Gorath, massive bear-like creatures who stood 3 meters tall and were covered in thick fur, attempted to help. They brought their battlefield surgical drones, small machines designed to operate on soldiers during combat. The drones got within 10 meters before Scarith's claws reduced them to scrap metal. By evening, the medical staff had given up. Soldiers gathered in small groups, speaking in low voices about the legend who would soon die. Some shared stories of battles where Scarith had saved their units. Others spoke of seeing him fly overhead, his wings blotting out the sun, bringing hope to desperate situations. At the edge of the base, in the refugee section, a different kind of gathering was taking place. Humans had only joined the Galactic Coalition 6 months ago. Earth had been discovered by a Coalition exploration ship, and humanity had eagerly joined the interstellar community. But the integration hadn't been smooth. Many human colony ships had been caught in conflict zones. Pirates and hostile species saw the newcomers as easy targets. One such transport had been attacked by raiders. Most passengers were rescued, but the trauma left deep scars. Among those refugees was a girl named Yuna. She was 12 years old, small even for a human child, with dark hair that fell to her shoulders and eyes that seemed to hold more sadness than any child should carry. She had stopped speaking the day her parents died in the raider attack. The coalition psychologists said she might never speak again. Yuna spent her days in the refugee quarters, usually alone. The other children tried to include her in their games, but she would just shake her head and walk away. She preferred quiet places where she could be alone with her thoughts. That evening, as the twin suns of Arcturus Prime began to set, Yuna heard the roar. It wasn't like the angry roars from earlier in the day. This one sounded different. It sounded like pain. It sounded like loneliness. It sounded like how she felt inside. She walked toward the sound. The refugee quarters were on the opposite side of the base from the crater. But Yuna was patient. She walked for nearly an hour, her bare feet making no sound on the metal pathways. The guards at various checkpoints barely noticed her. She was just another refugee child, and she looked harmless. When she reached the crater's rim, the sky had turned deep purple with approaching night. Below, she could see Scarith. Even in the dim light, he was magnificent. His scales caught the last rays of sunlight like dark mirrors. His wings, each one large enough to serve as a roof for a building, were folded against his sides. His massive head rested on the ground, and his eyes were closed, but she could see the poisoned spines. They stuck out from between his scales like terrible thorns. Some were as long as her arm. The flesh around each spine was swollen and discolored. Even from this distance, she could see the dragon's sides heaving with labored breathing. Yuna didn't think. She didn't plan. She simply started climbing down into the crater. The walls were steep, made of rocks that had melted and reformed when Scarith crashed here. They were still warm to the touch. Yuna moved carefully, finding handholds and footholds, her small size actually helping her navigate the treacherous descent. Scarith's eye opened when she was halfway down. His massive pupil, larger than her entire body, focused on the small figure climbing toward him. He should have been afraid of nothing. He was a war dragon, a living weapon, a creature of legend. But in that moment, seeing this tiny being approaching without fear, he felt something he hadn't felt in centuries. Curiosity. Yuna reached the crater floor. The ground here was scorched black, and the air smelled of ash and something else, something sweet and sickly that she knew must be the poison. She walked forward slowly, not with the caution of someone approaching a dangerous animal, but with the careful steps of someone who didn't want to cause more pain. Scarith watched her approach. He could kill her with a breath. One swipe of his claw could end her. But he didn't move. Something about this small creature, this human, felt different from all the warriors and medics who had tried to approach him today. Yuna stopped next to his massive foreclaw. Each of his talons was longer than she was tall. She reached out slowly and placed her small hand on his scales. They were warm. Warmer than they should be. Probably from the fever the poison was causing. But they were also smooth. Almost soft despite their hardness. She could feel his heartbeat through the scales. A deep rhythmic thump that vibrated through her entire arm. Scarith's breath caught. In 300 years of life, in 1,000 battles, in countless interactions with hundreds of species, no one had ever touched him like this. Not as a weapon, not as a tool, not as a monster to be feared. She touched him like he was alive, like he mattered, like he was worth saving. The dragon's eyes, which had been dulled with pain and exhaustion, suddenly focused with new clarity. He watched as this small human girl sat down beside his claw, her hand still resting on his scales. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. In the silence between them, something began to form. Something the galaxy had never seen before. A bond. Morning came to Arcturus Prime with twin suns rising over the horizon. Their light spilled into the crater, turning the scorched earth golden. The night guards who had been watching the crater rubbed their eyes in disbelief at what they saw. The human girl was still there. She had curled up against Scarith's massive foreclaw, sleeping peacefully beside the creature that had terrified trained warriors. And more impossibly, the war dragon's breathing had changed. It was slower now, steadier, no longer the desperate gasps of a dying creature. "Call General Thexral," one guard whispered to another. "Call him now." Within minutes, the crater rim filled with personnel. Soldiers, Medics, scientists, and curious base workers all gathered to witness the impossible scene below. General Thex Raal arrived with Dr. Zenpoi, both of them staring in shocked silence. "How long has she been down there?" Thex Raal demanded. "All night, sir," the guard reported. "She climbed down around sunset. We tried to call her back, but she didn't respond. We were about to send a team down when we noticed that the dragon had stopped thrashing. We decided to observe rather than risk disturbing whatever was happening." Dr. Zenpoi's crystalline body pulsed with rapid colors, a sign of excitement in her species. "Look at the vital readings. His heart rate has stabilized. The poison progression has slowed. This is remarkable." Below, Yuna stirred awake. She sat up slowly, stretching her small arms above her head. She looked at Scareth's massive head, still resting on the ground a short distance away. His eye was open, watching her with an intelligence that seemed almost human. She stood and walked around his foreclaw, examining the poison spines that protruded from his scales. There were dozens of them visible from this angle, each one a crystalline spike embedded deep into his flesh. The scales around each spine were discolored, showing shades of sickly green and purple. Yuna reached out and gently touched one of the spines. Scareth's entire body tensed, his muscles rippling under his scales. A low growl rumbled from his throat. But he didn't pull away. He watched the girl with those ancient eyes, waiting to see what she would do. She gripped the spine carefully with both hands. It was warm, almost hot, from the infected tissue around it. She pulled gently, testing its depth. The spine didn't budge. Scareth's growl grew louder, and his claw dug into the ground, creating deep furrows in the earth. Yuna let go and stepped back. She thought for a moment, then turned and began climbing back up the crater wall. "She's leaving," someone in the crowd said. The novelty wore off, but General Thex Raal watched more carefully. The girl didn't look frightened or defeated. She moved with purpose, her young face set with determination. Yuna emerged from the crater and walked past the stunned onlookers without acknowledging them. She headed straight for the botanical research gardens on the eastern side of the base. These gardens were where coalition scientists grew plants from hundreds of different worlds, studying their properties for medical and agricultural use. The scientist on duty, a plant specialist named Dr. Moravan, looked up in surprise as the small human girl entered. Yuna walked through the rows of exotic plants, touching leaves, smelling flowers, examining stems and roots. She moved like she knew exactly what she was looking for. "Child, you shouldn't be in here," Dr. Moravan said, following her. "These plants can be dangerous. Some are poisonous. Others are." Yuna stopped at a plant with silver leaves and small blue flowers. She pointed at it, then looked at the scientist with questioning eyes. "That's silverleaf from the Deneb system," Dr. Moravan explained, confused. "It has anti-inflammatory properties, used for treating swelling and infection." "But why do you—" Yuna was already moving to another plant. This one had thick, succulent leaves that oozed a clear gel. She pointed at it, then made a gesture like she was spreading something on her arm. "Gel root from Vega 9, the scientist said, growing more intrigued. "It's a powerful topical analgesic. It numbs pain and promotes tissue healing. Are you injured?" Yuna shook her head. She moved through the garden systematically, pointing out 7 different plants. Each one, Dr. Moravan realized with growing amazement, had properties useful for treating wounds, reducing infection, or easing pain. "You want these for the dragon," the scientist said softly. "You want to help him?" Yuna nodded firmly. Dr. Moravan looked at this silent child with new respect. "I'll prepare samples for you. But you need to understand, child. We've tried many medicines on Scareth. His biology is complex. What works on other species might not work on him." Yuna simply waited patiently while the scientist carefully harvested leaves, roots, and flowers, placing them in a collection bag. When Dr. Moravan handed her the bag, Yuna gave a small bow of thanks and hurried back toward the crater. By the time she returned, the crowd at the crater's rim had grown even larger. Word had spread across the base about the human girl and the dragon. When Yuna appeared with her bag of plants, people whispered and pointed. She ignored them all and climbed back down into the crater. Scareth's head lifted slightly as she approached, his nostrils flaring as he caught the scent of the plants she carried. A sound came from his throat, not quite a growl, almost like a rumble of recognition. Yuna sat down beside his foreclaw again and began her work. She crushed the silver leaf between two rocks, creating a paste. She mixed in the gel from the gel root, along with crushed petals from a flower called star bloom, known for its antiseptic properties. Then she approached the first poison spine. She spread the paste around the base of the spine, working it carefully into the inflamed scales. Scareth tensed again, his breathing quickening, but he remained still. His eye never left the girl. After coating the area thoroughly with the paste, Yuna gripped the spine again. This time, she didn't just pull. She gently twisted it while pulling, working it back and forth slowly. Patiently, the spine shifted slightly. Scareth's growl became a roar of pain that echoed off the crater walls and sent the crowd above stumbling backward. But Yuna didn't let go. She kept working, kept twisting, her small face tight with concentration. And suddenly, the spine came free. It was as long as her arm, crystalline and beautiful in a terrible way, still dripping with poison and infected tissue. She set it aside carefully and immediately applied more paste to the wound it left behind. Black blood oozed from the hole, but as the herbal mixture touched it, the bleeding slowed. Scareth's roar faded to heavy breathing, his entire body shuddering. Yuna moved to the next spine. Hours passed. The twin suns climbed higher in the sky, making the crater hot as an oven. Sweat poured down Yuna's face, but she didn't stop. One spine after another came free under her patient, careful work. Each extraction brought another roar of pain from Scareth, but the roars grew shorter each time, as if he was learning to trust the process. The coalition scientists monitoring from above watched their instruments with growing excitement. Each time a spine was removed, Scareth's vital signs improved slightly. The poison levels in his blood were actually decreasing. "This is impossible," Dr. Zenpoi whispered. "We tried everything. And this child with plants from our own garden is succeeding where our advanced medicine failed." "Maybe that's the lesson," General Thexral said quietly. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the right one. And sometimes, what a patient needs isn't just medicine. It's someone who cares enough to try." By midday, Yuna had removed 15 spines. She was exhausted, her hands shaking from effort, her arms covered in black dragon blood and herbal paste. But she didn't stop. She prepared more medicine, crushed more plants, and moved to the next spine. Scareth watched her with something new in his ancient eyes, something that might have been respect, or gratitude, or perhaps the beginning of something deeper that neither of them fully understood yet. As she worked on the 16th spine, something strange began to happen. Yuna's hands started to glow with a faint light, barely visible in the bright sunlight. It was a soft blue-white radiance that seemed to come from within her skin. She didn't notice it herself, focused entirely on her task. But Scareth noticed. His eye widened slightly, and a sound came from deep in his chest. Not a growl or a roar, but something else entirely. Something like a purr, a vibration that resonated through the ground. Above, the scientists' instruments went wild with readings they couldn't explain. Energy signatures they had never seen before were emanating from both the girl and the dragon. Patterns that seemed to mirror and harmonize with each other. "What is that?" someone asked. Dr. Zenpoi stared at her instruments, her crystalline body flickering with confused colors. "I don't know. It's like they're synchronizing somehow. Their bioelectric fields are resonating at the same frequency." General Thexral watched the girl work, watched the dragon trust, and felt his understanding of the universe shift slightly. Humans had been part of the coalition for less than a year. They were still considered the newcomers, the species that had yet to prove their worth among the stars. But this small, silent girl was doing something no coalition warrior or scientist had managed to achieve. she was saving a legend. And in doing so, she might be revealing something about humanity that the galaxy needed to see. As the day wore on and Yuna continued her patient work, removing spine after spine, treating wound after wound, the crowd at the crater's rim grew silent. They were witnessing something more than just medical treatment. They were witnessing a bond forming between two beings that shouldn't have been able to connect, a war dragon and a silent human child. Together, they were rewriting the rules of what was possible. 3 days had passed since Yuna first climbed into the crater. She hadn't left Scareth's side except for brief trips to gather more plants and supplies. The coalition medics had lowered food and water for her using cables, but she barely touched the meals. Her entire focus remained on the dragon. The transformation was remarkable. Scareth's scales, which had been dull and lifeless, now gleamed with their natural luster. His eyes were bright and alert. Of the 73 poison spines that had pierced his body, Yuna had removed 62. Each extraction had been followed by careful treatment with her herbal mixtures, and each wound was healing cleanly. But something else had changed, something the scientists couldn't measure with their instruments. Scareth and Yuna had developed a connection that defied explanation. The dragon's massive head would follow the girl wherever she moved. When she slept, he positioned his body to shield her from the wind. When she worked, his breathing would slow and synchronize with hers, as if helping her stay calm during the painful extractions. Dr. Zenpoi had filled 3 data tablets with observations. The phenomenon is consistent, she explained to General Thexral. When the girl is near the dragon, both of their bioelectric signatures stabilize and harmonize. It's as if they're sharing some kind of energy field. I've never seen anything like it in 40 years of xenobiology. Can other humans replicate this? Thexral asked. We've tried. 3 human volunteers attempted to approach Scareth yesterday while the girl was resting. The dragon responded with immediate aggression. He only calms for her. Thexral's communication device buzzed urgently. He activated it, and the face of Admiral Krevshan appeared, the supreme commander of the Coalition's 3rd Fleet. The Admiral's 3-eyed gaze was serious. General, we have a situation. Our intelligence has intercepted Vekran military communications. They're planning a major assault on your facility. Thexral felt his blood chill. When? 72 hours from now. They believe Scareth is incapacitated, which makes your base vulnerable. The facility houses critical research data and experimental weapons technology. They want it all. How large is the attack force? 3 capital ships, 15 destroyers, and approximately 5,000 ground troops. It's one of the largest Vekran operations we've seen in years, Thexral quickly calculated. Our garrison has 800 soldiers and minimal defensive ships. Our reinforcements are at least 6 days away. We'll need to evacuate. Agreed. Begin evacuation procedures immediately. Prioritize research personnel and critical data. I'm sending every available ship, but they won't arrive in time to defend. Your job is to get everyone out before the Vekran arrive. The communication ended. Thexral stood silent for a moment, his 4 arms hanging heavy at his sides. Then he began issuing orders. Within an hour, the entire base was in organized chaos as evacuation procedures commenced. Transport ships began landing and loading personnel. Research data was being copied and transferred to portable storage units. Soldiers prepared defensive positions for those who would stay behind to buy time for the evacuation. Everyone moved with the efficiency of trained military personnel facing an impossible situation. Everyone, except Yuna. When the evacuation order reached the crater, 2 soldiers climbed down to retrieve her. They approached carefully, mindful of Scareth's protective instincts. The dragon's eyes tracked their every movement, a low rumble building in his chest. Child, you need to come with us. One soldier said gently. There's going to be an attack. It's not safe here. Yuna looked at them, then at Scareth, then shook her head firmly. She sat down beside the dragon's foreclaw and crossed her arms, her expression stubborn. Please, we don't have time for this. We have orders to evacuate all civilians. Yuna didn't move. Scareth's rumble grew louder, and his tail swept across the crater floor in a clear warning. The soldiers retreated, and reported back to General Thexral. He climbed down into the crater himself, his military bearing softened by genuine concern. "Yuna," he said, using her name for the first time. "I understand you care about Scareth, but he's not fully healed yet, and we can't defend this base against what's coming. If you stay, you'll die. If we try to force you to leave, Scareth might kill us, and you'll still die when the Vacron arrive. Please, be reasonable." Yuna stood and walked to where her collection bag lay. She pulled out a datapad that one of the scientists had given her days ago. She had been using it to communicate simple needs. Now she tapped on it, and words appeared on the screen. "He can fight. I can help him." Thexral read the words and felt a mixture of admiration and frustration. "Yuna, Scareth is recovering. Yes, but he's not battle-ready. He still has poison in his system, and you're a child. I cannot, in good conscience, let you stay here to face what's coming." Yuna typed again. "You can't make Scareth leave. You can't make me leave. So, use us." "Use you? Use you how?" Instead of typing, Yuna pulled the datapad stylus and began drawing. Her hand moved quickly, sketching rough but clear diagrams. Thexral watched as a tactical map emerged on the screen. She drew the base layout, the surrounding terrain, the crater where Scareth rested. Then she added defensive positions, firing lanes, and movement patterns. Thexral's eyes widened. The strategy was crude, but brilliant. She was proposing using the terrain's natural features combined with Scareth's unique abilities to create a defensive perimeter that could hold against superior numbers. She positioned ground forces in locations that would channel enemy troops into kill zones. She marked the facility's power substations as potential energy sources for Scareth's plasma breath. "Where did you learn tactical planning?" Thexral asked in amazement. Yuna simply pointed to her eyes, then around the base. She had been watching, learning, understanding. In 3 days of working beside Scareth, she had observed troop movements, listened to soldier conversations, absorbed the rhythms of military life. Thexral took the datapad and studied the diagrams more carefully. His military mind, trained over 4 decades of warfare, recognized something profound. This wasn't just a child's drawing. This was strategic thinking that accounted for variables his own tactical officers might miss. "This could work," he said slowly. "But it's still incredibly dangerous. You're asking me to bet everything on a plan created by a 12-year-old girl and a dragon who was dying a week ago. 2. Well," Yuna typed one more message. "Better than running and losing everything anyway. At least this way, you fight." Thexral looked at the girl, then at Scareth. The dragon's eyes met his, and for the first time, Thexral saw something there beyond animal instinct or weapon programming. He saw intelligence. He saw determination. He saw a warrior ready to defend his home. "I need to consult with my officers," Thexral said. "Don't go anywhere." Yuna almost smiled at that. She wasn't going anywhere. That much was clear. Hours later, in the base command center, Thexral presented Yuna's plan to his senior staff. The reaction was mixed. Some officers thought it was madness to trust their defense to a child and an injured dragon. Others saw the strategic merit but doubted the execution. Commander Zaltek, the head of ground forces, studied the tactical map carefully. "The positioning is actually excellent. If Scareth can perform even at 60% capacity, and if our troops execute these movements precisely, we could hold long enough for the reinforcements to arrive." "That's a lot of ifs," another officer pointed out. "Every plan has ifs," Zaltek countered. "But this plan uses our advantages. The Vacran don't know Scareth is recovering. They don't know about the girl. They think they're attacking a defenseless research base. We can use that overconfidence against them." Dr. Zenpoi spoke up from her position at the science station. "There's another factor to consider. The energy harmonization between Yuna and Scareth. When they work together, both of them perform beyond normal parameters. If that effect translates to combat situations, Scareth might be more effective with the girl than he's ever been alone." General Thexral looked at the faces around him. Fear, doubt, determination, and hope mixed together. They were facing an enemy force 6 times their size. Evacuation would save lives but surrender critical assets and strategic position. Fighting seemed like suicide. But war often came down to impossible choices. We implement the girl's plan, Thexral decided. Evacuate all non-essential personnel. Research staff, civilians, anyone who can't fight, leaves immediately. Combat personnel will take positions according to these diagrams. And someone get me a communication link to that crater. If we're doing this, I need to coordinate with our secret weapons. As officers hurried to execute orders, Thexral returned to the crater one more time. Yuna was working on another poison spine, her hands glowing with that strange blue-white light. Scareth's scales had begun to shimmer with the same luminescence. Yuna, Thexral called down. We're going to try your plan. But I need to know, can Scareth really fight? Can you really help him? Yuna paused in her work. She looked at Scareth, and the dragon looked back at her. Something passed between them. A wordless communication that Thexral could only guess at. Then Yuna turned back to the general and nodded once, firmly. Scareth's response was to spread his wings for the first time in weeks. They unfurled like massive sails, each wing spanning nearly 100 meters. The movement sent dust swirling through the crater. Then the dragon lifted his head to the sky and roared, a sound of challenge and defiance that echoed across the entire base. It was the roar of a war dragon. Healthy and angry, and ready to remind the galaxy why his species was feared. Thexral allowed himself a small smile. Then let's show the Vacron what happens when they underestimate humanity. The countdown began. 72 hours until the attack. 72 hours to prepare for a battle that would either prove Yuna's worth or end in disaster. Above the crater, soldiers took their positions. In the command center, officers coordinated defensive strategies, and in the crater, a silent girl continued her work, removing the last poison spines from a dragon who would soon carry her into battle. The galaxy was about to learn a new lesson about humanity. The final hours before the attack passed in tense preparation. The base had transformed from a research facility into a fortress. Defensive barriers were erected at strategic points. Heavy weapons were positioned on rooftops and in fortified bunkers. Soldiers checked their equipment repeatedly, the nervous energy of coming battle filling the air. Most of the civilian personnel had been evacuated. The transport ships had departed, carrying scientists, support staff, and anyone not essential to the defense. Only 800 soldiers remained, along with a handful of medical personnel and technical specialists needed to maintain the base systems during combat, and one 12-year-old girl who refused to leave. Yuna had finally removed the last poison spine from Scareth's body the previous night. The moment of extraction had been accompanied by the dragon's loudest roar yet, a sound that shattered windows across the base. But when the spine came free, when Yuna applied her herbal mixture to the final wound, something remarkable happened. The glow that had been emanating faintly from both of them suddenly intensified. Blue-white light filled the crater like a small sun had descended into it. Soldiers watching from above had to shield their eyes. The light lasted for nearly a minute, pulsing in rhythm with both Yuna's heartbeat and Scareth's massive heart. When the glow faded, Scareth rose to his feet for the first time in weeks. He stood at his full height, his head reaching nearly to the crater's rim. He stretched his wings wide, testing muscles that had been unused for too long. Then he looked down at Yuna and lowered his massive head until his snout was level with her small body. She reached out and placed both hands on his scales, right between his eyes. They stayed like that for several minutes. Girl and dragon, connected by something the watching soldiers couldn't understand but could definitely feel. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the energy between them. Now, as the twin sons of Arcturus Prime began their descent toward the horizon, the Vacron attack force appeared in the sky. Their ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, black against the orange and purple sunset. 3 massive capital ships, each one 5 kilometers long, flanked by 15 smaller destroyers. They hung in the atmosphere like predatory birds, blocking out the fading light. In the command center, alarms blared. General Thexral stood at the central tactical display, his four arms working multiple control panels simultaneously. All units, battle stations. This is not a drill. Enemy forces have arrived. Prepare for ground assault. The Vacron ships began deploying drop pods, hundreds of them, small armored capsules that fell from the capital ships like deadly rain. Each pod contained 10 Vacran soldiers, insectoid warriors bred for combat. They would crash into the ground around the base and disgorge their cargo of troops. Estimated enemy ground forces, 5,000, an officer reported. Drop pods landing in sectors 3, 5, and 7. They're trying to surround us. Let them, Thexral said calmly. Everyone stick to the plan. Positions as marked. Wait for my signal. Down in the crater, Yuna climbed onto Scareth's back. She wore simple clothes. No armor, no weapons. Just a thin girl sitting on the neck of a war dragon. She had no saddle, no harness, nothing to hold on to except Scareth's scales themselves, but she didn't need anything else. When she pressed her hands against his neck, that connection sparked between them again, that harmony of energy that made them move as one. Scareth's muscles bunched beneath her, his wings spread wide. And then, with a powerful leap that cracked the crater floor, he launched himself into the sky. The soldiers watching from the base gasped. They had seen Scareth fly before, of course. But not like this. Not with this grace and power. He moved through the air like he had been reborn, like the weeks of suffering had been burned away, leaving only the perfect weapon he was designed to be. But now, he was a weapon with a purpose beyond programming. Now, he was a warrior defending his home. The first wave of drop pods crashed into the ground on the western side of the base. Hatches blew open, and Vacran soldiers poured out, their chitinous armor gleaming, their plasma rifles charging. They moved in coordinated units, just as their training dictated, spreading out to establish a perimeter. They never saw Scareth coming. The dragon descended from above like thunder given form. His plasma breath turned an entire squad of Vacron into ash before they could react. His claws swept through their ranks, each swipe sending broken bodies flying. His tail whipped around, crushing drop pods before soldiers could emerge. But it wasn't the mindless destruction of a rampaging beast. Yuna sat on his neck, her hands glowing with that blue light, and Scareth moved with tactical precision. He struck the enemy command units first, the soldiers carrying communication equipment. He destroyed their heavy weapons before they could be deployed. He created chaos in their ranks, exactly where Yuna's tactical diagrams had indicated would cause maximum disruption. The coalition soldiers watched in awe. Commander Zaltek, positioned with his troops at defensive point Alpha, spoke into his communication device with wonder in his voice. General, the dragon is following the plan exactly. He's hitting every target the girl marked as priority. Then we do our part, Thexral responded. All units, engage. Drive them into the kill zones. The coalition forces opened fire. Plasma bolts and projectile weapons lit up the darkening sky. The Vacron, caught between the coordinated ground fire and Scareth's aerial assault, tried to regroup. More drop pods landed, reinforcing their numbers. But each time they established a position, Scareth would swoop down and scatter them. From orbit, the Vacron commander aboard the capital ship watched his ground assault falter with growing rage. What is that creature? I was told the war dragon was incapacitated. Sir, it appears to have recovered, an officer reported nervously. And it's being directed by something. Its attack patterns are too precise to be random. Then shoot it down. All ships, target that dragon. The capital ship's main weapons powered up. Massive energy cannons that could punch through starship armor swiveled to track Scareth's flight path. The first shot missed by meters as the dragon rolled away with impossible agility. The second shot would have hit, but Yuna sensed it coming somehow, and Scareth dove at exactly the right moment. They're shooting at us, Thexral said grimly, watching from the command center. If one of those shots hits, the girl and the dragon are gone, but Yuna and Scareth had other plans. The dragon climbed higher, drawing the ship's fire away from the ground battle. Then he banked hard and dove straight toward the nearest destroyer. The ship tried to track him, but he was too fast, too agile. He flew underneath it, his plasma breath cutting along its underside like a blowtorch through paper. The destroyer's engines exploded. The ship began to fall, trailing fire and debris. It crashed into the desert 3 kilometers from the base, a spectacular fireball that lit up the night. "Impossible," the Vekran commander whispered. "That dragon just destroyed a warship single-handedly." On the ground, the battle continued with savage intensity. The Vekran outnumbered the coalition forces 6-1, but Yuna's tactical positioning gave the defenders every advantage. The enemy was forced to advance through narrow corridors between buildings, exposing themselves to crossfire. When they tried to flank, they found themselves in open ground, where Scarith could easily target them. Hours passed. The night was filled with the sounds of combat, plasma fire, explosions, the screams of wounded soldiers, and Scarith's roars as he dove again and again into enemy formations. Yuna remained on his back through it all, her small body somehow staying seated despite the violent maneuvers. Her hands never left his scales. That glowing connection never broke. But battles take their toll on everyone. Scarith was tiring. He had only been fully healed for a day, and the exertion of constant combat was draining his strength. His plasma breath was coming slower, less intense. His flight was becoming labored. Yuna felt his exhaustion through their connection. She pressed her forehead against his scales and closed her eyes. She thought of her parents, lost in the raider attack. She thought of all the people this base protected. She thought of Scarith, who had been dying alone until she found him. She thought about what it meant to refuse to give up, and then she did something that surprised even her. She began to sing. Not with her voice that was still locked away by trauma, but with her mind, with her spirit, with that strange energy that connected her to the dragon, a wordless song of encouragement, of strength, of shared determination. Scarith heard it. Not with his ears, but with whatever part of him had bonded with this human child. The song filled him with renewed vigor. His wings beat stronger. His eyes blazed brighter. He roared again. But this time the roar carried notes of Yuna's silent song, a harmony between human and dragon that resonated across the battlefield. The coalition soldiers heard it and felt their courage renewed. The Vekran heard it and felt fear creep into their hearts. In the command center, Dr. Zenpoi stared at her instruments in disbelief. "General, you need to see this. The energy readings from the girl and the dragon, they've synchronized completely. They're not just fighting together. They're functioning as a single organism somehow." Texrel watched the battle display, seeing the tactical markers showing Scarith's position, the enemy forces being steadily pushed back despite their numbers. "That's what we're witnessing," he said quietly. "The birth of something new. A bond between species that shouldn't be possible." Another wave of drop pods launched from the capital ships. The Vekran commander was committing his reserves, determined to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numbers. But as the pods fell toward the base, Scarith climbed to meet them. Yuna leaned forward on his neck, her hands blazing with blue-white light. Scarith drew in the deepest breath he had ever taken. And when he released it, when his plasma breath erupted from his jaws, it wasn't the normal orange-red flame of a war dragon. It was blue-white, the same color as Yuna's glow. It was hotter, brighter, more powerful than anything Scarith had ever produced. The plasma stream cut through the falling drop pods like they were paper, detonating them in mid-air before they could land. Dozens of pods exploded simultaneously, creating a chain reaction that lit up the sky brighter than the twin suns at noon. The Vekran commander watched his reinforcements destroyed and made a decision born of rage and desperation. "All ships, fire everything at that dragon. I don't care if we hit our own troops. I want that creature dead." Every weapon on all 3 capital ships and the remaining destroyers opened fire at once. The sky filled with energy beams and projectiles, all converging on one small point where a dragon and a girl flew together. "Scarith, evade!" Texral shouted into the communication system, though he knew the dragon couldn't hear him. But Yuna heard through the base's external speakers, and she knew they couldn't dodge this. There was too much fire, from too many directions, So instead of running, she made a different choice. She stood up on Scareth's back, spreading her arms wide, and she let go of everything, holding her back, her grief, her trauma, her silence. The blue-white glow exploded from her body like a star being born. The light from Yuna's body expanded outward like a shield. It covered Scareth completely, wrapping around his massive form in a protective cocoon of blue-white energy. When the barrage of weapons fire from the Vacron ships struck this barrier, something impossible happened. The energy beams didn't penetrate. They didn't explode against the shield. Instead, they were absorbed into it, making the glow even brighter, even stronger. Every shot the enemy fired only made Yuna and Scareth more powerful. In the command center, every instrument went haywire. Alarms blared as sensors detected energy levels that shouldn't be possible from organic beings. Dr. Zenpoi's crystalline body flickered rapidly through every color in the spectrum, her species' reaction to complete shock. "What is she?" someone whispered. "She's human," General Thexral said, his voice filled with awe. "She's showing us what humanity can become." Scareth felt the power flowing through him from Yuna. It was her strength, her will, her refusal to surrender, all channeled into raw energy. He opened his jaws and drew in breath, pulling in not just air but the energy Yuna had gathered from the enemy's own weapons. When he released it, the plasma stream that erupted from his mouth was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was a column of pure blue-white fire, as thick as a capital ship and as hot as a star's core. It cut through the darkness like a blade of light. The beam struck the nearest capital ship directly in its center. The massive vessel, 5 kilometers of advanced Vacran military engineering, simply ceased to exist. The plasma cut through its shields, through its armor, through every deck and corridor, vaporizing everything it touched. The ship broke apart in a massive explosion that could be seen from orbit. The shock wave from the destruction rolled across the battlefield. Vacron, soldiers on the ground, stopped fighting and stared at the sky in horror. Their most powerful warship had been destroyed in seconds by a single creature. "Retreat," the Vacron ground commander ordered. "All units, fall back to the landing zones. We need immediate evacuation. We do the I-5 we do the." But the remaining capital ships had other ideas. Their commanders, seeing their sister ship destroyed, responded with panic and fury. Both vessels fired their main weapons simultaneously, not at Scareth this time, but at the base itself. If they couldn't win, they would destroy everything. 2 massive energy beams lanced down from orbit, powerful enough to crack a planet's crust. They would hit the base in seconds and obliterate everything within 10 kilometers. Yuna saw them coming. She felt Scareth's exhaustion. That last attack had drained him severely. He couldn't dodge and he couldn't fire again so soon. They had one option left. She pressed her hands against Scareth's scales and poured everything she had into him. Every bit of energy she had absorbed, every ounce of her will to protect, every memory of everyone she had lost, and everyone she refused to lose again. The blue-white glow intensified until it was painful to look at directly. Scareth roared and flew straight up, directly into the path of the incoming beams. When the energy struck him, Yuna's shield flared brighter than ever. The dragon became a second sun in the night sky, absorbing the full force of 2 capital ship weapons. For a moment, nothing existed but light. The soldiers on the ground covered their eyes. The sensors in the command center simply went dark, unable to process the energy levels. Even the Vacron ships had to polarize their view screens to prevent their crews from being blinded. And then, slowly, the light began to fade. When vision returned, everyone looked up to see Scareth still flying, still alive, with Yuna still on his back. But both of them were glowing so brightly they looked like beings made of pure energy rather than flesh and scale. "Impossible," the Vacron commander breathed. "Nothing should survive that." Yuna stood on Scareth's back, her small form radiating power like a goddess of war. She raised one hand and pointed at the 2 remaining capital ships. The gesture was simple, but its meaning was clear. "Your turn." Scareth climbed higher, powered by the energy they had absorbed from the enemy's own weapons. He positioned himself above the capital ships, and Yuna's glow spread from her body to completely cover him. They looked like a comet, burning bright against the darkness of space. Then they dove. Scarith folded his wings and plummeted toward the first capital ship like a meteor. His body, protected by Yuna's energy shield, struck the vessel at incredible speed. They punched through the top of the ship, through deck after deck, the energy around them vaporizing everything in their path. They emerged from the bottom of the ship, leaving a hole so large the vessel began breaking apart from structural failure. Without slowing, they curved up and struck the second capital ship the same way. Through the top, through the center, out the bottom. Two massive warships, each carrying thousands of Vacron soldiers, were crippled in less than a minute. Both ships began falling from orbit, their engines destroyed, their systems failing. They crashed into the desert far from the base, creating mushroom clouds of dust and fire that rose kilometers into the air. On the ground, the Vacron soldiers who witnessed this broke completely. They threw down their weapons and ran, all organization forgotten. Some tried to reach their drop pods, others simply ran into the desert, driven by pure survival instinct. Within minutes, the battlefield that had been contested so fiercely was empty of enemy forces. The coalition soldiers stood in stunned silence. They had won. Against an enemy force 6 times their size, with overwhelming technological superiority, they had won. And they had done it because of a silent 12-year-old girl and a dragon who had been dying 3 weeks ago. Scarith descended slowly toward the base, his wings spread wide. The blue-white glow was fading now, both he and Yuna having exhausted their extraordinary power. He landed gently in the crater that had been his home during his recovery, and Yuna slid down from his back on trembling legs. The moment her feet touched the ground, she collapsed. Scarith's head lowered instantly, and he nuzzled her gently with his massive snout, a sound like a worried rumble coming from his throat. But she was still breathing, still alive, just completely drained. Medical teams rushed into the crater, but Scarith's warning growl stopped them. He wouldn't let anyone near Yuna except Dr. Zenpoi, who approached slowly with her medical scanner active. "She's alive," the doctor announced. "Exhausted beyond anything I've ever seen, but alive." Her body somehow channeled energy levels that should have killed her instantly. "She needs rest, water, and time to recover." General Thexral climbed down into the crater more slowly, his forearms feeling the weight of his years. He approached Scarith and Yuna carefully, respectfully. The dragon watched him, but didn't growl. After what they had all been through together, there was mutual respect between them. "You saved us all," Thexral said quietly, looking at the sleeping girl. "A child that we barely noticed. A dragon we were ready to euthanize. Together, you did what our entire military couldn't do." Over the next few hours, as the adrenaline of battle faded, the full scope of what had happened became clear. The Vacron had lost 3 capital ships and 15 destroyers, an entire battle fleet. Their ground forces had been routed. The base had taken some damage but remained operational. Coalition casualties were minimal compared to what they should have been. News of the battle spread across the galactic coalition at the speed of light. By morning, every species in the coalition knew the story. A human child, unable to speak, had bonded with a dying war dragon, and together they had defended a base against impossible odds. The response was immediate and profound. The Coalition Council called an emergency session. They wanted to understand this bond, this connection between humans and war dragons that no other species had achieved. Dr. Zenpoi presented her research, showing the unique bioelectric compatibility between human neural patterns and dragon physiology. "It's a 1 in a billion genetic coincidence," she explained. "Humans and war dragons evolved on planets hundreds of light years apart. Yet they share this harmonic frequency in their nervous systems. When properly synchronized, they can share energy, thoughts, even emotions. We never discovered this because no one thought to try. War dragons were weapons, tools. Humans were newcomers. But this child saw past all that. She saw a being in pain and offered compassion. The coalition established the Dragon Bond program within weeks. Across coalition space, War dragons, who had been treated as simple weapons, were paired with human volunteers. Not every human could bond with a dragon. The connection required specific neural patterns, and often a traumatic background that created latent psionic abilities. But enough could. Within months, dozens of human-dragon pairs were flying missions across the galaxy. Each pair developed their own unique combat style, their own way of communicating, but they all shared one thing: a bond deeper than words, forged from mutual respect and understanding. Yuna stayed with Scarith. When she finally recovered from the battle, 3 days later, she still didn't speak with her voice. But she didn't need to. She and Scarith communicated perfectly without words. They flew together daily, not as weapon and pilot, but as partners exploring the skies of Arcturus Prime. 6 months after the battle, the Galactic Council held a special ceremony. Representatives from every member species attended. Yuna, wearing simple clothes that she preferred over military uniforms, stood before them with Scarith's massive head lowered beside her. She looked tiny next to the dragon, but no one in that room saw her as small or weak anymore. The council speaker, an ancient being from a species that had been part of the coalition for 1,000 years, addressed the assembly. "We invited humanity to join our coalition less than a year ago. We saw them as a primitive species, barely capable of space travel, with nothing special to offer except numbers and enthusiasm. We were wrong. Humanity has shown us something we had forgotten in our centuries of war and expansion. They showed us that the strongest bonds are formed not through force or programming, but through compassion and understanding." He turned to Yuna. This child couldn't speak, but her actions spoke louder than any words. She touched a dying dragon that armies feared to approach. She healed wounds with simple plants when our advanced medicine failed. She stood against impossible odds and refused to surrender. And in doing so, she revealed a truth we needed to learn. The speaker gestured to Scarith. "War dragons were created as weapons. We bred them, programmed them, used them, and discarded them when they were too damaged to fight. We never thought of them as beings deserving of dignity and respect. Humanity, in their short time among us, taught us better." General Thexral stood and spoke, his voice carrying across the chamber. "When the Galactic Council asked what humanity brings to the coalition, I couldn't answer. Now I can. Humanity brings hope. They bring the ability to see potential where we see only problems. They bring compassion where we bring cold calculation. A human child saved a legend because she didn't see a weapon. She saw a being in pain who needed help. The Council voted unanimously to grant humanity full status in the coalition, with all rights and privileges. They also passed the Dragon Rights Act, which declared that all war dragons were sentient beings, deserving of respect, proper care, and the choice of retirement after service. Yuna listened to all of this with quiet dignity. When they asked her to say something, she pulled out her datapad and typed a simple message that was projected for everyone to see. "I just helped a friend. Everyone deserves that." The simplicity of her statement struck every being in that chamber. After all their debates about policy and politics, about military strategy and diplomatic relations, it came down to something a child understood perfectly. Everyone deserves help. Everyone deserves compassion. Everyone deserves a friend. Years later, when historians studied the early days of humanity's integration into the Galactic Coalition, they pointed to this moment as the turning point. Not humanity's technological contributions, not their military victories, but this single act of compassion by a silent girl who saw past fear to the suffering creature beneath. Yuna never did speak again with her voice. Some trauma runs too deep to completely heal. But she didn't need words. She had Scarith. And he had her. And together they flew across the stars, living proof that the strongest bonds transcend species, language, and all the barriers that fear creates. And whenever young humans asked to join the Dragon Bond program, they were shown footage of that first battle. They saw a small girl standing on a dragon's back, facing down warships, refusing to surrender, protecting everyone she cared about with every ounce of strength she possessed. That, the instructors would say, is what it means to bond with a dragon. Not power, not glory, but the willingness to stand beside another being and say, without words but with absolute conviction. I will not abandon you. We face this together. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. And the galaxy was better for it. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.5.